Now that you got your combo picked out, how do you get this onto this?
I forgot to put it through the line guide. Why is this so hard?
Video number 2 in our series for beginner bass anglers. What do you do after you get your combo picked out? You've got the rod, you've got the reel. What do you do with all this stuff? How do you get it on here? What should you do? What should you not do? That intro may have been a little bit of an exaggeration, but especially if you're a newer angler, you're going to make those sort of mistakes. And there's definitely some things you do want to do, and there's some things that you do not want to do when you're getting your reel spooled up. So the first step of spooling up your reel is going to be the connection knot to your spool and to use backing or not to use backing. That is the question. Backing. What is backing? Well, backing is simply referring to when you look at a reel, it holds a certain amount of line. This, for example, if it were 12-pound monofilament, would hold 165 yards. So if I had some monofilament here, and pretend this is 12-pound instead of 6-pound, this reel would hold 165 yards of this monofilament. But let's say instead of monofilament, I wanted to use fluorocarbon, 100% fluorocarbon, which is a lot more expensive than just a straight monofilament. Instead of putting on 165 yards, or however much it would hold, the diameter is a little bit different, I could use some cheap line. This was some line that I got at Walmart a long time ago that I've been using for backing. It was 1,000 yards for, I don't know, $6, $7, something like that. You can find deals everywhere. Now, I wouldn't recommend using this line as your main line because when you go to tie knots and stuff with this, the abrasion resistance isn't good. You want to get a good quality line, a monofilament, a fluorocarbon, whatever it is you're using, get a good quality main line. Now, if you're a beginner, monofilament is a great place to start. It doesn't have a lot of memory. It's pretty supple. It casts pretty well, and it's not going to break the bank compared to some of the braids or fluorocarbons on the market. And yes, as a beginner, accept the fact that you are going to get some backlashes that you just can't quite get out of your reel. You have to cut them out, but it's okay. It's just going to make you better at spooling your reel. Okay, so what knot do I use to connect my line to my spool? Well, whether you're going with just one main line without using a backing, if you are a newer angler, I would recommend a 10 to 15 pound monofilament if you're not going to use a backing and just put all that line on the reel. If you are using an inexpensive backing, either way, I would recommend using the arbor knot. Now, just for instructional purposes on here, I'm going to show you the knot with braid. It shows up on here a lot better. I personally don't recommend putting straight braid on your reel. If you tie straight braid to your reel, it will slip. So when you go to set a hook or you're fighting a fish, that braid will actually spin around the spool, cause you some issues down the road. Now, some anglers will use the arbor knot, but they will put electrical tape down on here so that braid has something to bite into. Or anglers will tie the braid straight to the spool. Now, this is personally something that I have not ever done. So leave me a comment below. Let me know if you have done this technique, if you've had any issues for you, if it's worked well. Let me know below. I'm curious to see how it works out. Now, when you're actually going to put the line on your reel, I want to point something out. I always have my reel on my rod. It's going to make it a lot easier when you go to wind the actual line onto the reel. But I want to show you this with the reel off just so you can see everything a little bit closer. But make sure when you go to put your line on, you go up to your first eyelet, run the line through that first eyelet, and then down to the reel. That's going to help when you actually get the knot tied and you go to start winding the line onto the spool. I'll show you that here in a minute. But for now, let's just take a look at the knot. So I take my line, go through the line guide of my reel, and into one of the holes of the spool, just like so. And all I'm going to do is spin the handle gently, and that's going to bring my line all the way back around. So that takes care of the headache of having to take the line and get it through and under the bottom of the spool. Just makes that step a little bit easier. Now from there, the actual knot, the arbor knot is what I use, and it's extremely easy. It's 2 overhand knots. That's it. 2. That's all. I'm going to take this tag end and I'm going to tie an overhand knot. Just the simple knot that everybody knows. If you can tie your shoes, you can tie this knot right there. That's the first step. And I'm just going to cinch that down to make a nice little overhand knot right there. The second step is to take my line, my main line that's coming from the spool up into here, and I'm going to tie an overhand knot onto this line. So I'm going to take my tag end, run it around this main line like so, and I'm just going to tie an overhand knot right here. That's it. So I've got this knot right here. and it's going to cinch down onto my main line. 2 overhand knots. Now you'll see this main line that's coming out of the reel. As I start to pull that, I'm just going to kind of take my fingernail and pull that knot down gently, and that's it. You want to make sure here that when you get this onto your reel that you're in the middle. And again, if you're going with a backing, it's important that when you tie your main line to your backing, you want to make sure that knot is in the middle as well, just so you don't have any issues down the road. You'll simply cut off the excess like that, and you are ready to go. Start putting the line on your reel. So a couple things to remember. When you get ready to start winding the line onto the reel, you want to make sure that the line is coming off the top of the spool, like so. It's going to be coming off the top of the spool onto your reel, and it's going to be actually going onto the top of your reel as well as it winds around. And that's going to help eliminate line twists down the road, especially if you're using a fluorocarbon or a monofilament. With braid, it's not as big of a deal because it doesn't have memory. So an easy step when you go to start spooling the line onto the reel, you don't need a pencil or somebody else to hold it. Just put the line back in the box and shut it so one side's coming out. Leave that little corner open and put this somewhere where it's going to be held in place, not too firmly, somewhat gently. And what that's going to do is put light resistance on this line as I'm spooling it up onto my reel, which is going to ensure that that line is packed tightly on my reel. Now I just take this and put it in, well, my tackle bag, pointing directly toward me as I go to start winding the line onto my reel. Now you can see as I start to reel the line on, I'm holding up about 1.5 feet on my rod and putting light pressure on that line. That's going to ensure I get a good tight pack onto the reel down here. And all I'm going to do is start reeling. Now you'll see once it gets to my actual spool, it's going to put a little bit more tension on here. I'm just going to keep my line held. I want to make sure I'm not holding it too tight because I want my line guide to move freely back and forth. That way it's going to put the line on here nice and evenly. Once I get to there, all I'm going to do is start reeling it. Now, if you're using a backing, I get to about there. I can't really see any more of the spool down below. I've got up onto the sidewall. Now I can start putting on my main line. Now it's up to you. This part I can't tell you exactly how much to put on. You kind of have to play with it. Some people like a little bit more of the main line. Some people like a little bit less. I like to put a little bit more. When I put it on, I'll show you. I want to get it to about 1/8 of an inch of that red ring there. Each spool is going to look a little bit different, but you don't want to overfill this too full because it'll be really prone to backlashing. But you don't want to have it where, like this, if I just left it like this, it's going to affect my castability. And as I'm tying knots and cutting line off, I'm just going to get to the point where I don't have enough line on here and I'm not going to be able to make good long casts. You just kind of have to play with it, trial and error, and find out exactly how much main line you want. Now, if you're a new angler and you're just putting straight mono on here, you would just keep going until this spool looked about like, well, about like that. I've got about 1/8 of an inch left between my line and the end of the spool. And that's about how much I want to leave on there. But if you did want to go with the backing, let's take a closer look at the knot that I use to tie my backing to my main line. And that knot just happens to be the uni to uni knot. This is an extremely easy knot to tie your backing to your main line. So let's pretend again that I had this blue braid on as my backing. I put it about halfway up the spool and I'm going to tie my main line on this green braid. The uni to uni knot is extremely easy. I'm going to take my 2 lines going in opposite directions and bring them next to one another, like so. Now this knot is going to be the same thing on each side. So to start it, I'm just going to take my, in this case, the main line, the green, and make a loop. Now inside that loop, I'm going to make 4 rotations around both of these lines right here. So you can see I've got the blue and the green together. I'm just going to make 4 rotations. So I'm going to bring that through 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. From there, I would wet my line, and then I'm just going to hold the tag end, gently pull it down, and it will make a small knot there. As you can see, it's a nice little round barrel all lined up. I'm going to do the exact same thing on the opposite side with the blue line, which would have been my backing material. I'm going to make a loop. I'm going to keep both of these lines together, and I'm going to run this around again 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. When I hold the tag end and pull this together tightly, I've got 2 of these uni knots. So to finish the knot, I'm going to take both of my lines and simply pull them. And those 2 uni knots are going to meet in the middle, pulling against each other, and they're going to tighten up. Just like that. Take your handy cutters and cut both of those tag ends. And that is what you're left with. Now make sure when you start reeling this in and you're putting your actual main line on, make sure that this knot falls in the middle of your spool as well, just to make sure it's not off to one side or the other, to make it off balance. Again, I've never had an issue with that, but I know some people have, so just make sure both of your knots are in the middle of your spool. From there, you'll continue winding on your main line until it looks something like this. Again, I take the line so it's about 1/8 of an inch from the top of the spool. Not anymore because you'll have issues with backlashing. And we don't want that, especially if you're new. So let me know in the comment section below if you have any questions about putting line onto your baitcaster. And let me know what you would like to see for the next installment of Beginner Bass Fishing. Again, I'm Devin with DEBO'S Fishing, and until next time.
Front style.